Morning, everybody. I'm Brian Athey, the president of Congressional Capital, and I'm delighted to be here with my longtime friend and former borrower. So the idea of the interview is for Joyce to tell us about her background, how she got into real estate, and about her journey, which I think is one of the most interesting journeys of human beings that I know. So Joyce, take it away. Tell us about yourself and your background.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you. So I started in real estate many years ago, maybe before you were born, I'm not sure, around about that time, in the great state of New Jersey. And I was living in the suburbs and decided I had a background as a paralegal and I majored in political science in college. But I decided I was going to be a real estate agent.
Just so the audience knows, Joyce is one of the most intelligent, thoughtful, well-read people I know. So what made you want to be a real estate agent?
Well, by that time, I knew I didn't want to be an attorney. So I'm sure you could identify with that.
As a former attorney, I can definitely identify.
I worked as a paralegal for 3 years, and with the idea that I was going to go to law school at night while I was working as a paralegal. And then I decided that's a really bad idea. So I did not do it. Former fiance and I had bought a piece of property up in North Carolina in the mountains in a little town called Highlands. And we worked with a real estate agent, and we saw how much money this real estate agent made on this transaction. And my boyfriend said to me, "You could do that." So I gave it some thought.
When did you buy the house in Highlands?
Highlands, we bought a piece of property. We bought a 20-acre piece of property, and later we did things a little backwards. We built a barn before we built the house, and we had horses at the time. And that was in 1979, maybe.
Highlands now is a very high-end popular area.
Even at that time, it was where people, it wasn't like a tourist kind of destination, like a lot of places in the mountains. It was really a second home location that friends of ours from Florida turned us on to. And we just fell in love with the place and ended up buying this piece of property. So in any case, because it seemed we were kind of in the Mother Earth stage of things, so having a big garden and living out in the country and things like that. So in New Jersey, I got my real estate license in 1982, and interest rates it was like buying a house with a credit card. Prices were inexpensive, but the interest rates were a bit high. So
what were the rates then? Just do you recall? Ish?
Yeah, they hit 21% at one point, but they hovered around 19 to 20%. So buying a house, as you can imagine, was quite a project, and the market slowed to just about nothing. It was really people that had to relocate, because within 30 to 40-minute drive of where I was living, there were probably 50 corporate headquarters. And those were the only people moving because they had corporate relocation packages, In any case, the economy and the market eventually turned. It was quite a market for some years, I ended up fixing a property, renovating a property, then I ended up building a property. So the construction end of things, I always liked a lot. And I was able to learn a tremendous amount by the builder who was on site. And I was always out in the field, learning new things. So anyway, then from there, I I had a little hiatus, and I decided to go to culinary school in Italy for a year.
And we'll definitely get back to that. But Joyce, is, of course, a fabulous chef, among other things, which is one of the reasons I wanted to have Joyce on today, is that she's a very talented and multifaceted human being. So you're an interesting tribute to what a life's journey, how interesting a life's journey can be if you kind of let it come to you.
Yeah, or you're crazy, like my mother used to tell me. But so then I ended up, after that little hiatus, and after I finished culinary school, I worked on private yachts for 3 years. So did a little bit of traveling here and there, and then went back to the real estate business. So I moved to North Carolina. The single family home market was booming at the time. And I was there in Raleigh, North Carolina for 5 years, and I worked for 2 national builders. And then made my way to Washington, D.C., because I wanted to live in an urban setting. Started selling condos in Washington, where I met Trent who was the first person that I met in Washington. And then through Trent, we happened upon you. So
When did you meet Trent, and when did you start selling condos in Washington?
So I arrived the summer of 2003,
Mhm.
and I was looking for an apartment to rent, and I answered an ad, and it was Trent. And I ended up, I didn't rent the apartment he placed the ad on, but he had another one that he had under renovation, and I rented that one. And then the rest is history. You know, it's like I adopted another family. So I was there until 2009. And then we had a bit of a upset to the economy then. So I decided to take another little bit of time off, came here to Italy, to Rome. And I was here for a year and a half, and then went back to DC, back to the real estate world, but there really wasn't much going on in terms of new development. So with Trent's kind of urging, I bought the first house that I did a renovation on. And that took me on a, 2011 to 2019, an 8-year journey.
You
Anyway.
remember the first house that you did? Tell us about the project,
Yeah, it was up off 14th Street, and the neighborhood was up in Columbia Heights, and the neighborhood was a little iffy. And I was all set to put some money down on a condo to buy. And Trent's like, well, wait, see this place first. I was like, I don't know. We're driving up 14th Street and the neighborhood's getting worse and worse. And he pulls down the street, and I was like, Trent, I am not living here. He goes, okay. Well, maybe you could buy the house and fix it up. And even that, I was like iffy on it. But we walked into the house, and I love old houses. And this was one of the row houses built, at the turn of the last century. We ended up buying it together, Trent and I. And that was my first experience of taking something apart in Washington, taking something apart, other than a condo, and putting it back together again. But I discovered wonderful neighbors. It had an interesting history because it had been a Jewish neighborhood. And the woman next door was an elderly Black woman. She was probably in her 80s at that point. And she told me she remembered walking down the street with her grandmother and being the only person of color. Like everyone in the neighborhood was white. And as they walked down the street, they're kind of looking around going,
Wow.
And little by little, the neighborhood transformed, but it was all very kind of, people who were passed the houses down through generations. It went from an aunt to a niece or a grandparent to, a grandson or something like that. And they worked for the post office and for various city offices, or they were taxi drivers and that sort of thing. And even though the neighborhood appeared, not people with not a whole lot of money to spend, fixing up their houses on the outside. And so the neighborhood looked a little shady, but I'll tell you, I never had any problems with like a nail being stolen from my house. The neighbors kept watch on it for me. I went around and introduced myself to everybody, so they would know who I was. And it was a bit of an education in, Washington life and neighborhoods and things like that.
What did you do on the first one? Did you make good money or no? Or do you remember?
I don't remember exactly how much we made, but I think we did okay because we went on to buy another one and then another one after that. The one I probably did the least well financially was the house I probably loved the most out of the houses that I did. It was in LaJoy Park, a freestanding brick house built in. And when we found pieces because I didn't want to do some serious demo in there because it was just a historical little jewel. And I think the house was built in 1884 or thereabouts.
Wow.
Had gorgeous staircase, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful house. So I tried to keep things as historically accurate, which ended up costing me a lot more money in the end. That's a house I wish I had kept.
Yeah. If you had to give advice to anybody who's listening, in your real estate journey, what's been your favorite part of the journey? Like some positives and then some things to really look out for that are potential negatives.
The positive for me has always been the creative aspect, and also being able to kind of rescue something. Like for me, it's something like I walk in the door and I immediately know about a house. I think you either have it or you don't, that ability to see beyond what's there and like what you can create out of space, to make it more functional, to make it more beautiful, to use the space more creatively. And especially the older row houses in DC, because, they're long, they're narrow. It's like, how do you get light in there? How do you transform it into a modern space that people can live in and really utilize and appreciate? The harder part has always been working with contractors. It's kind of like you're herding a kindergarten of cats.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I mean, I think many people can relate to the experience of, they're supposed to show up and they're supposed to start at 7 or 8 a.m. and then they're not there, and you call,
no phone call, and
they don't answer. And then, it's one of it's interesting because, having been, you were a paralegal, I was a lawyer at a big law firm. The idea that you could just like no show and it's no big deal.
And then the other challenge as a woman, and I don't mean to sound sexist about it, but you're working with men. I had one lady electrician who was an absolute pleasure to deal with. I'm sure you know who I'm talking about.
Yes.
But for the rest of them, taking instruction from a woman, when I walk in, it's like, no, you can't do it like that. You have to do it this way. And this is the way I want it. And they're kind of looking at you, and in the back of their minds, they're like, why isn't she home, like cooking dinner for her husband or something?
Yeah, they're not used to being, in my lifestyle where I take instructions from my wife every day. So I'm used to it, right?
Exactly. With a lot of the guys, I got to a point of mutual respect. They knew that I could get work, give them work. I would rely on them. I wasn't going to micromanage, but when I said, okay, you told me you'd be done this week, and I'm going to rely on that. I think once they saw that I really could do the job and I had a feel for what was going on in the field, then I think you build a level of respect, and it turned out okay.
Tell everybody what you're doing now, because it's been quite a journey for you. And you are in Italy, as you mentioned. Joyce has dual U.S. Italian citizenship, right? So
yeah, through my grandparents. And so I've had an Italian passport since 2001. So this was always sort of a long range project. I thought it was going to be a little more long range than it turned out to be, as far as retiring to Italy. So in any case, I made that decision. And part of it was a conversation with you and Trent that I had. And the other part was a conversation with my accountant. And between the two, it was like, oh, well, maybe I can retire a little bit earlier. And the cost of living here is beneficial, in comparison to Washington. So I was able to do that. And I thought, well, what could I do in retirement, that would be interesting? And wine in Italy have been two passions of mine. So and people were always calling me up or emailing me for advice. Oh, we're going to Italy. Where should we go? What should we do? Can you think of this? Think of that? So I decided, well, maybe I could make a part-time business out of it and do wine tours in Italy. So as part of my long-range plan, I went to grad school in 2016. I was the oldest one in the class by quite a bit. And there's no age limit on, your brain working if you let it. So anyway, I got an MBA with a concentration in wine marketing. So I thought, well, if I'm going to take on a new little business venture, I don't have the business background in that business, but I should maybe get some educational credentials. So I did that. And then it's been a learning experience ever since. I achieved the Italian Wine Scholar certification, the French Wine Scholar certification, an organization called WSET, the Wine and Spirits Education Trust, which is worldwide. And I'm working on my sommelier certification from the Federation of Italian Sommeliers right now.
It's amazing. And, Joyce has sent us wines many times. I don't drink wine, but my wife, every single person that has a bottle of wine that Joyce picked tells us how fabulous it is. So if people are listening and they want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do it?
Well, I have a website, and it's www.vino-talia.com. So they can certainly contact me through the website. My email addresses, my phone numbers are on there.
Of all the things you've done in your career, which are many, what's your favorite?
Well, from the real estate end of things, it was being able to renovate houses that I really loved. In fact, when I moved here to Rome, the apartment that I took, the owners live in New Jersey. So they live in the town next to where I grew up. So we were two Jersey girls, and they wanted to do some improvements to the apartment. It was left to them by their father when he passed away. So I ended up renovating the bathrooms, having all the windows redone, painting the whole place, installing a new heating system. So it's, you could leave the building business, but it doesn't necessarily leave you.
That's right.
Yeah. When you visit here, I'm going to talk you into looking at some villas for a vacation property and see if we can renovate in Italy. That was interesting because, I had to learn. I mean, I speak Italian well enough, but never in the building trade. So I had to learn a whole new vocabulary, between the plumber and the electrician and all the parts of things. And it was an interesting experience. And then from the wine end of things, discovering Italy is, when it comes to wine, it's a country that's so far above other places on earth. We tend to think, oh, France and this and that. There are over 1,000 native grapes in Italy, more than countries combined. It's like a voyage of discovery constantly. But I think the best part, and what sort of marries the whole thing together for me, being a huge history buff, is that wine is history in a glass. You once asked me what I like so much about it. And you can go to a region in Italy, and that glass of wine will tell you everything there is to know about the people, about the land, about the history, about the culture, about the food. And it's all there in a glass, in a bottle. So it's a constant voyage of discovery. So that's what makes it so exciting for me. It's another creative process. And I mean, I've been to vineyards where literally, I think every vine, every plant is like a pet for some people. They can go out there and tell you, and this when it was planted, and this is what it like, and I had to do this to it. And when we were talking about how keeping real estate over the long term, it is a good kind of philosophy to follow. It's kind of the same when you see this connection where properties have passed from great grandparents to grandparents, and now you meet some 30-year-old young man who's the enologist, and he's continuing the traditions of his family. And sometimes literally it's for hundreds of years. Wow. So it's a fun thing. You'll see, we'll go to Italy and we'll meet some of these people, and you'll see when you come to Sicily in June.
Really looking forward to it. Well, Joyce, thank you so much. It's been a fascinating Zoom. I've learned things about you I didn't know, which is really cool. What a fascinating and cool life you've lived. If anybody wants to reach out, please do to Joyce.
Yeah, come to Italy and drink some wine.
That's right. Yeah, enjoy the Italy experience. I know I will. So thank you all for joining today, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Brian.